Welcome to the Stories Are Soul Food podcast with your hosts, Brian Cole and best-selling author, N.D. Wilson. This audio is brought to you by Cannonball Books and Great Homeschool Conventions.
Welcome to episode 7 of the Stories Are Soul Food podcast. We're here with guest Forrest Dickison, illustrator, animator, landscape painter. What else? What do we describe? Father?
Fan of clouds.
Cloud fan of clouds.
Hello.
Welcome, Forrest.
Good
Welcome
to be here.
to Stories Are Soul Food. We are going to be talking about graphic novels, are we not?
Yeah, that's the plan today.
Okay. So kick it off, Brian. What are we talking about with the graphic novel?
I guess I'm approaching it as, what is a graphic novel? Is it any different than a comic strip?
No. It's longer and it tends to have, it's not just one gag. It's like one long story. So it's basically, I think the closest thing to a graphic novel would be a film adapted into a comic book form. For all intents and purposes, it's just long form comics.
Okay, gotcha. So you kind of agree. I think I read somewhere online that a graphic novel is basically the binding. That's the difference between it and a comic.
The binding?
The binding, if it's bound all together.
Oh, you're talking about comic books.
Yeah, comic books. Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. So the saddle stitched,
Right.
like super cheap newsprint, stapled, like a
Right.
folded, stapled, like old Spider-Man or Hulk comics. Or
Yeah.
X-Men 134.
Where do anthologies go then? Like a Calvin and Hobbes anthology?
I guess maybe your definition, the other one I read was that if it has a beginning, middle, and end, then it would count as a graphic novel. If it doesn't, then it's a periodical. But I don't know.
So a graphic novel is, I have assumed, just a 3-act story that is illustrated in comic form. If somebody actually did bind it saddle stitched, it wouldn't make it not a graphic novel.
Where was this definition found?
Well, I just was looking around trying to find out if they are in fact different, or I was suspicious that it was just the publishing industry's attempt to make more money, which
Sure,
probably is.
but they
Yeah.
and also
Nothing wrong
now
with
that they're popular, they are in form. They're changing a lot. There's a lot of
Yeah.
different execution. So there's
Yeah.
some that are just illustrated, more heavily illustrated chapter books, basically.
Mhm.
Some that are comics, in that you're talking about thought bubbles and
Yeah.
speech bubbles and panels.
Yeah.
And others that aren't that way at all.
Yeah.
So, man, what was the book that really pushed people a few years ago? Hugo Cabret, Invention of Hugo Cabret, where there was hundreds of pages in the middle of illustrations with no words. And it was prose, and then a big block of just, full page illustrations that told the story, that picked up the story and carried it through.
What was it called when they marketed it?
People were torn. It actually caused a little bit of a controversy, at least when it came time for awards, because people loved it. So was it an illustrated book? Was it eligible for the Newbery, or was it eligible for the Caldecott? And that was kind of the struggle. But that was back when people cared about rules. It actually this is a totally different topic, but it is, now we live in a time when rules are bad.
Mhm.
Like boundaries are bad. And so seen by the industry and often by readers. So now the Newbery, which is an endowed award for, and as a novelist, I take this very personally, an endowed award for novels,
Right.
for stories that are not dependent on illustration.
Right.
Now they have given that now, I believe, multiple times to graphic novels.
Okay.
Have given the Newbery Award, where previously the graphic novel would have been only eligible for the Caldecott, which is for the best book of the year, which is dependent upon illustrations. And so finding that binary really insulting, now awards committees don't give a rip what the awards are technically for.
Right.
They just stick the seal on it.
Because like the modern, I guess if we're talking modern graphic novels, wouldn't Mouse be one of the very first, like Art Spiegelman's Mouse? It reminded me of what we talked about last episode, where you were saying the reason you can talk about adult themes for children and everybody when you move the main. So when you take World War II and move it to mice and the bad guys, the Nazis, as cats, you're all of a sudden able to tell a story you wouldn't be able to tell. And I was wondering
younger people.
to younger people. And I was wondering if graphic novels, what you guys thought about graphic novels having, what do they do? Why, what is it about pictures? Are we a less literate culture, and so we like pictures more? Are graphic novels a sign of our degeneration?
Probably.
Yeah, probably. That's what I was thinking. Probably.
Yeah. But then why do we like them so much? Because I know my son, he's reading Hazardous Tales, and it's graphic novel historical adaptation.
Yeah.
The first one's about Nathan Hale getting hung, and he loved it. And it's hard to get him to read a full book. He's working on it, but
I think they can be really helpful. I've got no objection to them. They can be really helpful with a reluctant reader.
Yeah.
But the question is, do you get them past it?
Right.
And the fact that they are a destination, and I have no objection to them in genre or form. The question is just, does their dominance, or does as they consume more and more of the market share of publishing, is that a sign? Is that a bad sign of the culture overall? And I think it probably is, but it also is not the graphic novel's fault, nor is it the fault of the graphic novelists. So if Doritos suddenly start being eaten, more than hamburgers, like,
the culture is done.
Yeah, it's like, okay, what is that a sign of? It's like, that doesn't mean the Doritos evil, but the fact that Doritos are now consumed at a rate 100 times what they were 10 years ago, that would be something that would, comment on the nature of the culture. So I think the fact that graphic novels now really do consume a huge chunk of the market share. There are a lot out there, and there's a lot of excellent graphic novels out there. There's a lot of really fun graphic novels that I have absolutely nothing but praise for, but they're now taking the place of bigger, more meaty projects. So I wouldn't be surprised if the next Harry Potter was a graphic novel series, something that just reached that level of dominance, and that would be strange. That would be a mile marker. When the best-selling book of the year is a graphic novel, it will be a mile marker culturally.
Yeah, Japan culturally has 15 issues of manga published per person per year in Japan. So it's like 1.9 billion and 15 per person on the island of Japan.
I think that's reasonable.
Well
Not
done,
too many.
Japan. It sounds like about right.
15 bags of Doritos per person.
That's within the margin of error for cultural health.
Yeah.
So you look at big series like Amulet that have spanned years and years, and you look at obviously what like Doug TenNapel's done. What he's done is a lot of really far-fetched weird, and that's kind of what he sees the graphic novel as accomplishing, is enables him to have flights of fantasy and imagination that work with a comic book audience that wouldn't work in prose. So it's back in the day when I was, I think 2007, when I was first talking to animation producers who make like animated feature films, and talking to them about concepts and ideas and what it was they wanted to pursue, they would always say, why must it be animated? They didn't want to make any movie that was an animated film unless it had to be animated. And I think that's kind of the graphic novel now would be a great way to approach it. Would be, I have a story. Why is this story better as a graphic novel than as prose? And there's stories where that could be absolutely the case. And that could also be the case for particular artists. So like Forrest is an illustrator. So if you're looking at a story he wants to tell and he wants to create something, which medium is better? And if you could do a A++ graphic novel or do a B- prose novel, and you're looking at the two, saying, I think this is one I could do, or this is one I could do. Like, well, the choice is easier. If you're looking at, I could do an A++ prose novel or an A++ graphic novel, then you look at the reader and which will impact them more and which will reach more people, feed more people, affect more people. And you make the choice there. But it is really interesting because as awards go to graphic novels, as graphic novels are developed out, ranging from Lunch Lady comics to Baby Mouse, and they're not really graphic novels, they're comics, but they have little through stories, those little books. And my daughter loves those. And I'm not worried, that I'm glad that she reads them. Yeah.
Okay. So Forrest, I guess, chime in there. What do you like about graphic novels, or why would you choose a graphic novel?
To create one?
Yeah.
Actually, let's back it up and say to read.
Yeah.
Why would I read one?
No, if you look at one.
Yeah. When you head to the library, which way would you go?
Yeah. If you're going to make a choice, like what's the last graphic novel that pulled you away from a prose book?
Man, it's a tough question because prose at this point in my life has been the majority of what I consume. But the last one that I was into that felt like I got the same or a similar level of immersion and world building and interest was Jeff Smith's. And there it was just the visual artistry was top shelf. So it was
still black and white though, right?
Black and white. Yeah. And I think that one, they did a color version, which I think ruined it a lot.
He's a purist.
Well, just for that one. I mean, Color's great.
Is that adult or kid, or is that, what would you call that?
Middle grade, I'd say.
I've read it too. Yeah. Very pen and ink style. Really kind of strange though, right?
One that I wouldn't think anyone would tell in prose. Like, we've got these characters that are actually bones.
Yeah.
And what's the hook there? Just if you're hearing about it or reading about it, seems like a weird sort of pointless jump to make, versus like the visual. You can see when they're drawn, they have this nice visual appeal to them. That keeps
the roundness and smoothness, coherence.
They're like lumpy bone thing. They sort of look like bones.
Yeah. This may talk about my reader comprehension. I didn't realize they were bones, actual bones. I thought they were just like kind of lumpy balloon shapes.
I mean, it's never explicitly stated that they are in fact bones, but
they are.
If you squint, you can get it.
I mean, their names are
Boneville, bones out of Boneville.
Now I'm feeling stupid.
Anyways.
That concludes our graphic novels.
Thanks for having me.
The end of episode 7. Yeah. Okay. Well, like, talk about something massively popular, like the Amulet series. Really imaginative and fun. Like, is what I guess, it was powerful as in fun visuals. It kind of reminded me, I don't know, you guys should tell me what is it about that works, or that has made it a bestseller, or is it that kind of Dorito, or what are we talking about with what's special about the Amulet series? Forrest as an illustrator, what do you think what's the strongest part of what he's got?
World building definitely seems to be a big one with what I've heard from kids who have read it, things like that. And he's willing to throw anything in there, from space to elves to, it kind of
spider
spans,
bots,
spider bots, robots to wizards. It's a little bit of everything. But I think, Nate, you might have a thought on this, but the hook that has got people into that is a character who aspires to something that's positive. So it's not it's more geared along the lines sort of a classic adventure story versus an inward psychological plunge.
Yeah, I think it is a classic. Like it is a classic hero's journey kind of a story that spans lots of settings and weirdness. And so what Forrest just said about everything being incorporated into Amulet, anything could happen in Amulet.
Right.
And yet the architecture of the narrative is still very, very classic.
Gotcha.
It's not a subversive or inverted narrative at all. And so I think because of that, he has the freedom to go in very wild places, because he's got that strong through backbone that resonates and has always resonated. Like it's like that core narrative that readers have been wanting, and young readers have been wanting forever. They always want more of those. And he's done a great job with it. But that series is actually interesting because Forrest worked on that series.
I did.
Forrest was a colorist on that series, right?
I did, on book 8.
And that's kind of one of the things that's interesting about big color graphic novels, is that, like TV shows, they are teams. And there's a strong there is a creative personality at the center who's the boss and who's in charge and who's telling a story. But it's a lot of people who work on those.
Yeah, can you guys explain what's the general workflow for those who are unfamiliar with how graphic novels are made? I always assumed it was just a guy sat down and did it all in his room.
No,
unless you're Jeff Smith.
Yeah, sure. Guys,
although I think even
guys
his
have done that.
wife helped out. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the appeal for a graphic novel, at least for me as a graphic novelist, is that instead of an animated feature, you don't need hundreds of people. You can do it with one or 2 or 3. One if you're really lucky or good or whatever. But you can craft a whole feature length project or style film. So
what's like workflow
paper.
For that?
Workflows. I mean, you start writing it. So
and that varies depending on the creator. Some people start with scripts. Some people
like
start by boarding it. Like they're actually just storyboarding the story. That's how they create it. Others it's prose and then gets translated into sketches. And
would they draw it themselves, or would they have someone who helps them draw it?
They would ink pages. They would go from
gotcha.
sketches to final illustrations, which they would ink digitally usually.
Yeah, nowadays.
Yeah. And then they would hand it off to color teams.
And then the script would go. Do they typeset the script, or do they still write it by hand?
Depends.
It varies. It's weird. I mean, graphic novel scripts are weird. They're weird. So
what do you mean by that? Just because they don't, I assume
people there's no rules here. I don't think there should. Yeah, I don't think there should be. But a graphic novel script, it will start with like page 1, panel 1,
Yeah.
And then you describe what's in that panel, and then write the dialogue for the characters in that panel. And then you can say like quarter page panel or splash panel. And then you write what's in that panel and then have the dialogue subsumed underneath that. And so then it's the next page 2. You insert a page break, and page 2 is, at the top is 3 equal sized panels. And so like somebody writing a script can end up calling out with massive specificity the shape of every single panel on a page. And that's weird to me.
Yeah, it is pretty strange.
It makes sense if you're the one writing and illustrating versus like a film script where you have a lot of open-ended.
Yeah, I actually, well, sure. But it feels to me like it doesn't make sense at all to, to call out the panels or anything like that. Tell the story and then have the artist board these scenes and these characters the way you would. It's weird. It'd be like writing a script for your prose where,
a novel script.
I feel like, okay, so at the bottom of this paragraph, have it be intense. And at the top of this paragraph, and write that map. So tell the story. I want the script to tell the story and then have the artist then incarnate that story, with various structures. So we have Forrest and I are working on a graphic novel together, an adaptation of 100 Cupboards. And, I started with screenplay format so that he would have creative liberties with, the storyboarding. And then from there, the publisher asked me to move it into graphic novel format, which I did. And it was super, super weird. But that was just to actually get the project sold and started. And then now I can go back to a screenplay format and he can storyboard off of that. So it is odd. It's really, really odd. And having looked at the different kinds of script styles that people currently use, I don't understand. I know Kazoo for Amulet, I know there is no script. I know he just basically boards and boards and boards and throws stuff away, constantly boarding and throws it all away and shapes his story that way. I know 10 April scripts. I'm sure other people script, but I don't know what their scripts necessarily look like. Because if it's an artist who's writing, I would assume they would be drawn to boarding it quickly and sooner. And if it's an author who's trying to write one, I would assume that they would way over specify, a lot of the descriptions of what you're seeing on the page.
Panel 1, scene 1, close up of Hobbit and the Hobbit hole.
Yeah. If we're going to be broader, we probably should do this. Should you as a parent be concerned that your kid is reading too many graphic novels? The answer would be, well, if they are, sure. If it's
really too many.
If it's actually too many.
By definition.
Yeah, by definition. Yeah, you should be concerned.
And which one?
But yeah, exactly. But I think it is really healthy for kids to read broadly and to read across genres. And
if there's one thing that we keep coming back to, it's that. For sure. Let them read it if it's good.
Yep. And then and if they get stuck there, I mean, there was a time when I was little when I started listening to the audio Bible every single night. And I had this big cassette set of the Bible, and every single night I put in those tapes, and I would do like half an hour or an hour every night.
Which narrator?
I don't remember. And I would recognize it though. And my parents, my pastor father and my English teacher mother eventually banned it.
No way.
Yeah.
Love it.
So in my home, I was forbidden for a while from listening to the Bible at night because they were worried that it was like, is he listening and engaging, or is it a weird security blanket? Like, have I habituated myself to?
He must have been a great narrator.
Yeah. Have I habituated myself to only fall asleep if somebody's reading the Bible aloud? Is that what the Bible is to me?
Moving into this sort of holy sleep zone.
Yeah. Like this is where I tune out and fall asleep.
Yeah.
And so they banned it just to see, like, would I have trouble sleeping? What was going on? And I was like, okay, it was fine. But it's that kind of like, even the Bible. Like and I think that was a wise move of them to make sure that it wasn't getting weird for me. So if you have a kid who will only read graphic novels or is, plowing through, doesn't care, the baby bird that we talked about, I think we talked about in an early episode, like people who have no discernment, the baby bird who consumes anything, horrible graphic novels, good graphic novels, mediocre graphic novels. They don't care as long as it's not an actual novel. Like, that's a problem.
Yeah.
But if you have a kid who won't read a graphic novel because they only read prose, you should make them. Like, get them a good one, make them read it, broaden your imagination, be able to consume and engage with stories in different forms.
Right. And with my son, it seemed that when we found a good one, it was something he would then read for hours. And you can see he's starting to get the development
Right.
to move on to a real book that would, and now he is transferring, it's stuff like early reader chapter books, but you know, he's starting to make that transfer, and he's sort of got the taste of what does it feel like to actually sit and read for a long time. And he got that from,
the pictures gave him the endurance.
Right. Yeah. Which is fine.
So how old is your oldest, Forrest?
2.
And is she drawn to pictures and illustrations, or does she want to hear stories?
Right now, she's hooked on Bill Pete, actually.
Awesome.
Great pictures. His prose is way too long. So I limit myself to a sentence a page and just make it up as I go.
Yeah, because he has full like 300 words per page.
Yeah,
right?
it's too much.
But you don't need it because the illustrations are so good. They can drive.
Yeah. So yeah, it depends. There's some stories that she likes because of the words, I think, but right now we're big into pictures. There's an ogre in one of them, and she wants a stuffed ogre for Christmas.
Lilius, her father's daughter for sure.
Stuffed ogre for the 2-year-old girl.
I love it. Okay.
What else do we need to cover on graphic novels?
I think we should talk about some of our favorites. They don't need to be, we don't need to like come up with some intense
I Am Legend.
top 10 list. That's your favorite graphic novel?
Yep.
I have been working through that for the last.
Did it take you 4 months to read a graphic novel?
Well, this one. It's long. Not long.
It is long.
It's one of those ones that bounces. It kind of pushes the boundaries on both ends, where you can have a whole paragraph of introspection and then a little bit of action, and then which is really fun. That is something about just the graphic novel as a medium that I think sometimes it gets a bad rap for, is that people think it's more like just watching a film. So it's a passive engagement versus an active engagement, which is not true. It's just instead of your imagination working with words, you're just working with pictures. So it's like you're given one image, a gap, and then another image. Say if it's a guy with a hat on in the first panel, and then the second panel is the guy with the hat off. Your mind is working in the space between the panels, and so you still have this active reader involvement. So it's fun to see with like I Am Legend, for instance. You have some really interesting ways of sparking the imagination that you couldn't get anywhere else, even with a film. I'd say is like,
okay, so I've seen the film and I've read the original novel.
Okay,
but I don't know, like, what do you mean by that? Like, how could it be? How does it improve?
Because I don't know if improve is the word. It's different. It changes because you're given images with the element of time introduced. So the way it flows down the page, just the composition of a page can give you a certain emotional punch or something like that. So space, like size of drawings, how far apart are you, what you're showing. So it is a different language than.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Is it compared to the movie?
I think it makes me wonder about hieroglyphics, in terms of what did the Egyptians see when they looked at that? Like, how did their imaginations work, and how were their imaginations trained to read in between, like Forrest is saying? So if I'm going through I Am Legend, then you see really effective use of white space in some ways, and I don't mean that like literally just white space, but gaps, use of emptiness, and that's the spaces where your imagination is working that Forrest is talking about. So you're going from this to this, and you're connecting. It's like you're running across water on lily pads. Like, it's just, you have to get from here to there. And if done correctly, it requires the reader to do a lot of work, to do a lot of creative engagement, a lot of work. And it's not passive. It's not passive at all. And unfortunately, there are tons of novels and graphic novels that are pretty passive. They just really spoon feed it to you. And those are the weak ones, the ones that drag you into engagement and drag you into co-creation. The most, I think, are the strongest.
Which is why bone is better in black and white
than color.
You give it less.
Callback.
Yeah.
Callback.
Okay. So those are adult level. What about kid level graphic novel?
I always say the same. I have not read that many graphic novels for being Asterix. I have looked at a lot of graphic novels, but yeah,
Man, Tintin was big for me.
I know, me too.
And so
That's the one I go back to every time.
I have a huge amount of affection for Tintin because I have a lot of gratitude, both affection and gratitude towards those books. And at the time, graphic novels were not a thing.
Right.
Like it wasn't a distinction. People just thought, well, this is a comic.
It wasn't even that. It was a Tintin.
It was its own thing.
Yeah.
Asterix. The Asterix comics were amazing, but I thought of them as comics, but they're through stories.
Yeah.
Loved them. And Tintin was phenomenal. And in my childhood, were very difficult to find. I mean, these were not easy to find. So they were treasures, and there was no Amazon. You had to.
You'd fight over them in the library. There'd be 5 copies in circulation.
Yeah, and you'd look at the back and you'd see there's so many Tintins.
I know, where are they?
And yet there's only Tintin in Tibet.
Right.
Like Tintin in Tibet is the only one in Moscow, Idaho right now. Like, where are these other Tintins? On a trip with my family, we were in Annapolis, Maryland, and I walked into a store. There was not even a bookstore. It had some books, but it was mostly like toys and, souvenirs. And here's a little wheelie shelf of Tintins. I was like, what on earth?
Gold mine.
And yeah, exactly. Gold mine. I only had limited funds in my pocket, and so I could only buy one, and it was excruciating. Okay.
Which one did you buy?
King Ottokar's Scepter.
Nice.
Oh, that's a great one.
I still have it somewhere, and it's pretty tattered, but I wanted every single one of those Tintins on that, wheelie shelf. And then now we have it was really funny because when I bought every single Tintin for my children, when I was like, we will have all the Tintins, like done. Here they all are. They all love them, but they aren't the same.
They really needed that supply and demand.
That scarcity helped.
Well, that's the thing is I started collecting for my 2-year-old daughter, and she likes Tintin in America because there's a crying baby in one panel on the back, and that's all she cares about. Then I stopped because I thought the scarcity, the hunt for the Tintin was such a big part of why it was so good. And obviously they're great on their own.
And I honestly think that those, they scratch the same kind of itch that Indiana Jones does. It's like, it's really good at sparking imagination, not just engaging the reader with the imagination in this particular story, but sparking the reader's imagination about the world, about the history of the world, about different locations. It's awesome. I mean, they're really, really phenomenal. And I know this is about books and reading, but the Canadian cartoons
are pretty good.
Yeah, solid.
Canadian cartoons.
You can only find them on YouTube, right?
No, I found DVDs.
Oh no, yeah. They were made in Canada.
Yeah,
How about that? Yeah, I have all of them.
Yeah, and they're pretty great.
Yeah, they basically just use the exact comics as the boards and just 1-to-1, which is so. Awesome.
Which is a flavor of adaptation we could use a little more of it. It feels like when you watch some.
They didn't ruin it.
Could you please just duplicate the experience as much as is possible?
Right.
Yeah. It has
So I think we unanimously landed on Tintin as basically the straight up best.
I know. I just wondered if it had gotten better since my childhood, and I mean, I really enjoyed.
They've aged really well, and there's of course ones that you have to say like these are the ones that have been cycled out of the canon because of racism, stereotypes, that kind of stuff, and some of that pretty. I think some of that is valid,
right?
Because he was Belgian.
Yep, and we know what King Leopold.
We know what those Belgians did. So while we forgive him for being Belgian because he made a great comic, a great series of graphic novels, he's still Belgian.
And some of them,
his breed of imperialism was pretty gross.
But who reads Tintin in the Congo, anyways?
Yeah, no one now. You can't find it.
Well, yeah, but the art's terrible.
Yeah, the art's bad.
He hadn't landed on his final design, so
yeah, the art's bad. Everything's bad. Skip that one. Get all the other ones. The Soviet Tintin one is pretty funny too.
Yeah. You could tell he was finding his.
Speaking back to publishers, they're desperately trying to codify everything. Like Tintin Alphard is the newest one that came out, which is literally his sketches tried to assemble into a book form. And
I also have that. It's fun.
Yeah, but you're trying to use every part of the buffalo.
Right. Even the green wobbly bit.
So yeah, for adults, I like I Am Legend, and for kids, Tintin.
Right.
Tintin.
Yeah.
In first, second, and third place. We already mentioned Amulet. It's great.
I love Cardboard.
If you have kids who really are needing a kick in the imagination pants, 10 April's great. Cardboard. Bad Island.
Yeah.
Ghostopolis, but Tommysaurus Rex.
For something about, I think the dead pet in Bad Island was one of those imaginative hooks that got all my kids into it.
The dead snake.
She has a dead snake like the little girl does, and my kids were in for the whole story as soon as they found the dead snake, I think there's a lesson there.
But 10 April, one of the things that's fun about 10 April is that when you're reading, you absolutely cannot trust him. And it's he might be the most unreliable creator that you'll ever encounter, meaning you don't know what's going to happen when you turn that page. So there's a lot of people who get into a steady rhythm and you can trust them. Like, it'll all be okay. It'll all be fine. This won't involve, some very, very wild strangeness on the next page that then is cataclysmically awful for your character. So I do kind of like the wild card nature of 10 April because I can't anticipate.
Yeah.
And there's downsides to that. There's weaknesses to that. And so when it goes wrong, it goes wrong in particular ways. And there's other ways in which that's just a lot more fun. It's a lot more fun to be turning the page and not knowing what's coming.
I think with the graphic novel, the ability to turn that page and see what's next, I think that might be the feeling of a graphic novel that, it kind of reduces the excitement of story grip on every flip in a way that like a novel can't do. Or even, it even feels like sometimes a movie. I mean, a movie can do that with a quick cut, but I think the graphic novel imitates that really well.
I think we landed on a really good conclusion, which is that you should buy all your children all the Tintins.
Yeah. And I'm sitting here thinking like, what else? And I can never, I know that Asterix is as a medium that those were like, there's so much potential, at least for the best Dorito, but it's been a while since anything as good as Tintin has been made.
Yep.
Well,
there we go. That's where we let it land.
I think we did.
Tintin.
Graphic novels.
Forget graphic novels. Read Tintin.
Right. Pictures with beginning, middle, and end. We got it.
We don't care how it's bound.
Right.
As long as it's Tintin.
As long as there are 32 Tintins for each of your children, right? Something like that. They can share them. So there we go.
Perfect.
Okay.
Peace out. This has been episode 7. We have thoroughly engaged with graphic novels. Don't ever let the topic be discussed again. I think
the definitive podcast on
the definitive full stop discussion.
We've plumbed the depths. There's nothing else to say.
Perfect.
There we go. Cut.
Thanks for listening to this week's edition of the Stories Are Soul Food podcast. Before you go, if you haven't heard of N.D. Wilson's 100 Cupboards series, I wanted to introduce you to the very first book. 12-year-old Henry York is going to sleep one night when he hears a bump on the attic wall above his head. It's an unfamiliar house. Henry is staying with his aunt and uncle and 3 cousins, so he tries to ignore it. But the next night he wakes up with bits of plaster in his hair. 2 knobs have broken through the wall and one of them is slowly turning. Henry scrapes the plaster off the wall and discovers doors. 99 cupboards of all different sizes and shapes. Through one he can hear the sound of falling rain. Through another he sees a glowing room with a man strolling back and forth. Henry and his cousin, Henrietta, soon understand that these are not just cupboards. They are, in fact, portals to other worlds. 100 Cupboards is the first book in this fantasy adventure written in the best world-hopping tradition and reinvented in N.D. Wilson's own inimitable style. Find 100 Cupboards today at canonpress.com or wherever you get your books.